Welcome back to the artist journey on OzFineArt. This show today is about finding your voice. What does finding your voice really mean? It is such a central and important dynamic and scary process to go through, to find my own voice, not just as an artist, but we're talking about as a human being, as a person. What is it that I'm on about? What is it that I want to convey? What is it that I want to respond to? How is it that I want my voice to come forward? In what ways do I want to express myself in relationship to all that I've received from my parents, my culture, my school, my upbringing, from social media, and all that I'm downloading into my brain every day? How is it that I want to speak from my own authentic place? I think the metaphor of the artist's journey is helpful, but God, this is about all human beings. This is about finding my own sense of empowerment, my sense of myself. Who am I? And what is the value that I have to bring to others? What is it that I want to convey? Huge questions, but it comes down to a few central steps, a few dynamic moments that just awaken us to who we are and give us our voice, give us the capacity and the skill and the ability to put forward our own voice into the world. Join us on this journey of discovery. The first steps to individuation, to finding ourselves, to our own personal identity, come forward in our early childhood when we are interacting with our parents and coming to terms with myself in comparison to my mother, my father, my sisters, my brothers. This sense of identity that's emerging in these early years is fragile on one hand, but it's also really strong and robust because we can push out our identities against the world. We often push out against the world to find who we are. And so we often push too far. We're pushing boundaries all the time. We're trying to see where the boundary is even, or if there is a boundary. And when we have good parenting, those parents are pushing back at us. They're pushing back boundaries. They're giving us a sense of right and wrong, of I can do this, but I shouldn't do this. I should do the right thing and learn not to do the wrong thing. And we have this emerging sense then of a moral compass that guides us as we grow older. And this gives us a sense of valuation and becoming a valuable human being. Becoming a valuable person means that we form values, but we also respond through values. So that's really the core definition of becoming responsible, is being able to respond appropriately in each situation. And every situation is different. And knowing how to respond in one versus another is the depth of, the breadth of the extent of responsibility, the ability to respond in different situations. Coming to terms with our identity then as we grow older is a dynamic process that involves the push and pull of relationships, the ups and downs of learning, the making of mistakes and being able to pick ourselves up again and learn from those errors and those mistakes. To realize that learning itself is like a musician, learning the guitar, and each chord that you make on the guitar can be at first a very painful process. I know I studied guitar for a number of years, and I advanced in folk and in classical guitar work, and I loved it so much. I spent hours after hours, day after day, night and morning and evening and afternoons, all passionately focused on improving my music. And mistakes for me became a routine practice. The more mistakes I made, the more learning I made. And the more I could learn from mistakes and be aware of them and make the correction more quickly, the faster the learning process became. So it kind of accelerated itself. The wheel, the hamster's wheel of learning got faster and faster when I learned to correct the mistakes that I was making and how I was holding my hands, for example, on the neck of the guitar, and being able to switch between the chords with the fingers more quickly was both a memory process in the muscles, but it was also a cognitive process, an awareness. And the more I became aware of the musculature process, of the communication between the muscles and my mind, and how my unconscious self, my gut, my intuition, and my feeling part of me was interacting with this process of learning, of the technical aspects of that, it was a combination of emotion, sense, feeling, and intuition that emerged within what you would call art, the artfulness of music. And the same principles, same basic principles apply to how do I find my voice. As an artist, as a painter, when I'm working with paint on the canvas, it's a similar process for me as was years ago, learning classical guitar, in that I need to learn some of the techniques of how to hold a brush, for example, how to apply a bit of paint on the canvas, and then how to blend that paint. But at the same time, that technique interacts with emotion, feeling, a sensate experience, a visual sense, an ability to move with the emotive feeling, the emotive sense, and the intuitive direction that this painting might be taking, to interact with how the paint is emerging on the canvas through that emotive process is really a profound moment. It's a moment of surrender, but it's also a moment of bold self-expression that kind of focuses not the mind so much, but the being, the heart, the energy of self towards a communication, towards an expression of meaning. And that meaning, that expression becomes a story, becomes an embodiment. It becomes something other than myself as I reflect on that creativity process, that externalization of something inward is expressed and speaks back to me, a story of my own becoming. And isn't this the way in our human relationships as well? In our relationships, isn't it true that when we're falling in love with somebody for the first time, we put forward what we feel might be our best self, obviously, and we're hoping to God that that person really loves what we have to offer. We're afraid very often to show our shadow side to them because we feel vulnerable, and we're cautious about sharing the parts of us that are contentious and difficult to live with. We want to pull in that person, to have them be part of our lives because we love them so deeply and we want to be a part of that forever. And the same is true with that other person. They're dealing with the same kind of dynamic of putting the best foot forward and yet being cautious about showing themselves too much. And isn't it ironic that we, in a way, we hope to be accepted in our deepest selves, in the parts of us that are most vulnerable, is where we hope the most that our loved one would accept us. And isn't it painful when that doesn't happen? It's a similar process as an artist or as a musician, that when we interact with the music itself, that music is what we fall in love with. and we express our energy towards that beautiful music and learning the intricacies of that music and hearing and feeling that music expressed back to us through our artistic expression, we come to terms with a part of ourselves that is also deeply emotive and vulnerable and deeply insightful, in that we're combining parts of ourselves that are both our best foot forward and our deepest parts of vulnerability and the expression of our deepest emotion through that musical expression. And a similar way as a painter will bring forward their best self to express on the canvas the epitome of their capacity, their best skills put forward on the canvas, at the same time expressing the shadows and the nuances and colors that express their deep feeling, sometimes despair, sometimes a profound loneliness, sometimes a existential, really profound grief and loss that emerges through the colors of a painting. I think of some works by the Impressionists where they express this depth of personal feeling through the beauty on the canvas that makes the viewer almost intuit immediately, through an immediacy of presence, what that painter may have been feeling in the moment that they expressed this on the canvas. And this raw emotion in color emerged through this beautiful inspiration of what we came to know as Expressionism, the ability to express pure emotion and pure color on the canvas that conveys this immediacy of depth and meaning and a sense of purpose through sharing our most vulnerable places as human beings. This reminds me so much also of the journey of becoming a therapist and my teaching counselors for so many years, how to learn the skills of empathy, how to learn the skill of intuitive presence, to be with somebody, to listen to their story, to put our own ego identity aside enough that we can be present to another person and to deeply listen, to deeply, be with them, to journey with them. And this process of learning the skills of therapy, we call them micro skills in communication, is a difficult process for therapists coming into the profession because you're again learning the techniques of the artfulness of therapy, just like a musician or a painter learns the techniques of the artfulness of that approach. And it takes time to learn those skills in such a way that they become part of our unconscious repertoire, our innate ability to flow with those skills in such a way that they no longer are the focus anymore. The focus of the technique on the canvas, for example, isn't the focus of the work. It's not what a person might try to convey, unless that is what they're trying to convey. But usually it's the theme. It's the overarching message. It is the feeling. It is the scene and how that scene is conveyed on the canvas. It's the artfulness of putting all of those tools of the trade together in a package that almost makes the technique disappear. And what emerges is the immediacy of that artwork for the viewer, for the person who is participating and appreciating in that artfulness. Much like as a client, I find it very difficult as a therapist being a client in therapy because I'm always looking at what the therapist is doing how they're engaging the skills, and they're usually not doing very well. And it's really kind of ironic and funny to observe them trying to be a therapist when you're very much aware of the techniques and of the areas that are involved in it. Such a similar way, artists with other artists are keenly aware of the skills and technique and processes and steps involved in the artistic process, which is why there's so many videos on YouTube that are process-oriented, where artists are sharing techniques with each other or helping emerging or beginning artists to learn those steps, those early steps in that process of learning and growth. It's a great process, and it's really important to have that interprofessional dialogue. It's not so much my focus here, though, in this series. Although we've called this the artist's journey, we're using this as a storyline, as a metaphor of something much more profound, much deeper, and dare say, important, more important and relevant to the human project that we are engaged in right now at this time historically, where we are all struggling so much, so deeply to find that authentic voice, to find that voice within a spirit of respect and of responsibility for ourselves and for others within society. This is part of the journey that we're going through as the human species, to come to a place of altruism after years of division, to come to a place of giving of the self to others in a world of abundance, means that we must grow. We must transcend our hiccups and our shortcomings to find a place where we can be more powerfully ourselves and more engaged in an act of loving kindness and of mutual communication with each other in respect. In all of these areas, I think, in art, music, therapy, in business, in commerce, in so many areas of life that I have experienced, where you focus on the work at hand, the style emerges over time. Where you focus on the work as its own entity, as its own energy, as its own purpose and focus, that work begins to express themes. And those themes over time emerge to become what we call an artistic style, a style of personality, a style of working in the world. And it is such that our personality itself is a construction of this thematic emergence. This emerging of the themes of who we are as a person is what we call personality. In my understanding of that, then, there are obviously dispositions of personality, but there is also a thematic, a narrative quality, a storied quality of who we are. Well, this is who I am. This is where I come from. These are the relationships that helped to form me. This is who I am emerging to be. This is who I hope to be. This is all about a story. This is all about a narrative of becoming. And when you understand that, it's like a wow. It's a big wow, because you go, wow, this is part of the reality of my life. This is how my life interacts with other people's lives. And as we interact and overlap in our stories, we change each other, we influence each other, we grow and we evolve as human beings. And this is the nature of relationships. This is why the artist's journey is such a powerful metaphor and a powerful process, because the journey itself is about a responsiveness and a reflexivity that enables us to be responsive and to be reflexive, to respond in a way that is flexible and engaging of our critical sense. Our sense of right and wrong, our moral compass is engaged through the artistic process. I first realized my sense of my own artistic style was emerging after having painted several works and coming to terms with the sense that I was expressing an emotive impression on the canvas that had a psychodynamic element to it. In other words, I was expressing emotion and feeling with a therapeutic edge. It was like expressing something that wanted to emerge, to share a story of transformation, to share a moment of insight, so that I would be able to communicate that and the viewer would grasp that when they saw this work, when they saw this image, they would go, wow, how does that make me feel? They would get an immediate sense of the feeling, an immediate sense of a narrative or a story. For example, it could be as simple as a tree. Or I would often use the image of a wigwam from the Mi'kmaq Nation as a symbol of family and relationship and place, where the fire in that wigwam expressed the warmth of family, the intimacy of a home, the context of that home within nature, and the unity that that vision conveyed. Also, in counterpoint to my current feeling of disjointed culture, of a culture that has lost its way, of a modern experience in the world of alienation, where this image of the wigwam and the fire, the hearth fire of the family, would express this yearning for connection, this yearning for family and for place that had been taken away from a people, but not just a people, from all of us in a way, from all of humanity, through this historical process that we've been going through of human evolution. We are all, as a human family, struggling to connect in these ways. And so these metaphors have power. They have a commonality to them, a story that we can understand, a story that we can share. I think this is central to the artist's journey, but it's also a human journey. It's a journey of everyone in every place, in every time. The steps then, of finding your own voice are quite simple, but deceivingly so. And I would just like to convey this in this sense that listening to yourself is a process that happens over time only when you engage with life. As you engage with life in relationship or with an artful process or with music or, in business or in commerce, when you engage in a process of collecting art, for example, or in art appreciation, you are engaging in a learning process as well as an active participatory process. You're learning as you're acting, and the action feeds back to you insights and new awareness. And so that feedback loop is itself where you begin to learn to listen, to observe. Listening is a form of observation, just as watching, seeing is a form of observation. Seeing is believing, in a sense. When we see ourselves reflected back to us, we then begin to see, another layer of the reality emerging. When you think about the metaphor of the mirror, today's mirror is very bold. It's very crass. It's very flat in a sense. The mirror that we look into in the washroom in the morning, the mirror on the wall is very transparent and reflects back immediately what it sees. But in older cultures, the mirror was a refractive surface of metal, and so the surface was bent, and it conveyed a much more artistic sense of reflection And that reflection in the mirror, in the old cultural sensitivity, was a form of poetic sensibility. It was even less so than looking at your own image in a pond in a clear pool of water. The water was also clearly reflective and a bit confronting for an individual without any mirrors in their lives to see the likeness of their face reflected back in the clear pool of the water. And so there was a mysteriousness about this. There was a sense of a sacredness to the mirror and the role that the mirror plays. And so in our present sense of this now, in today's world, we have a social media that's pointing back this very refractive, very harsh view of self. And at the same time, social media distorts and provides a almost medieval mirror-like quality of a refraction of self, where it distorts the image of the self, and what we see reflected back to us is sometimes a very alienating image of who we are. And that filtering of that social media online is very confronting and very difficult and can be a source of alienation for people that don't have already a sense of themselves emerging inwardly. And so it's a fragile place to be when we're putting ourselves out there on this social platform. And what will we see reflected back, and how will we deal with that internally in ourselves is a very powerful question to ask. But I have to say that in one sense, artists are some of the best at knowing what this process is over a very, very, very long time, over centuries past, where artists have been continually needing to put themselves out there, to share their most vulnerable selves with the world through their art and their artistic process and their production of art in the world. They have engaged in this process of performativity, that is, the performance of the art in the social milieu, in the social forums, and the struggle with coming to terms with what does that mean? Who am I as an artist? How can I maintain my sense of identity in a world that doesn't necessarily understand or even appreciate what it is that I do? These are questions that we ask today in the world of social media, and now everyone in society is engaging in this process. And I would dare say that most people, the vast majority of people engaging online, are struggling with these very questions. How will I find my voice? How will I articulate my perspectives? How will I cope with putting myself out there and having this reflected back to me in ways that may be quite distorted at times? How will I cope with this social world that is emerging? And what does this mean? And who am I in this? These are profound questions. And I think at the heart of this is, this metaphor of the artist and the artist's journey, which we all share most profoundly now as a human family. We are together in this struggle. We are, in a sense, exploring this new frontier of human evolution, of sharing our identity in cyberspace, of sharing our identity through artificial intelligence, of sharing our identity through these applications and formats and structures and environments online. And what does this mean for us as a human family? What does it mean for me and for you in your identity, in who you are in the deepest self? And how can you hold on to that in a world of constant change and constant evolution? These are profound questions. We'll explore them more in this series together. I invite you to like and subscribe, particularly if you've listened to this point in the video. Please do subscribe so you'll get the next drop to your notification, and let other people know. Let YouTube know that you like and you subscribe to this so that other people can enjoy this as well. We are OzFineArt.Au. Visit our website, OzFineArt.Au. And we are on Substack. And the publication is called OzFineArt Collective. Thank you so much for participating and for being with us today.